this is what we have as a follow-up. We have heard from the Navajo Nation Veterans Administration prior. We have heard from the Navajo Nation Division of Community Development and Community Housing and Infrastructure Development Department, or better known as CHID, under DCD. And then we also have heard from Navajo Housing Authority. But what we wanted to do is recap from what the presentations were and recommendations from you colleagues. Recommendations, we asked them to come back today to solidify an update presentation on how many houses they can produce, how they'll produce those housing, and how the execution of these of this process can be done over the next 3 years. So with that, colleagues, members of the Naabik'íyáti committee, first we'll listen from, again, the Navajo Nation Veterans Administration, and then down to CHID, Navajo Housing from three organizations. So without further ado, I think Mrs. Orline or maybe Office of the President or Vice President might be presenting on behalf of the Navajo Nation Veterans Administration. Did we get any kind of presentation from them? May, did you get anything? No. We haven't regarded a presentation, but we'll see. Maybe they have one. Anybody on from the Navajo Nation Veterans Administration this morning?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. This is Director Zwerline.
Good morning. Mrs. Orline, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, good morning, and good morning to the members of the 24th Navajo Nation Council, staff, and members of the executive branch that are also listening on the call. There is no formal presentation for today's discussion. As you mentioned, Mr. Speaker, this is a summary of the previous reports and presentations that we have made on veterans housing and where we currently stand. Wasn't exactly sure what this session was going to entail. I had requested follow-up information, but I did not receive anything back. So based off of your information this morning, just in summary, we currently at the Veterans Administration have 1,433 pending applications for new home construction for Navajo veterans. We feel that through contracting out to Navajo-owned contracting firms, that our capacity to build will only be limited by the capacity of the firms we enter into contracts with. If we enter into contracts with small firms, they will be able to grow slightly based on the dollar amounts attached to the contracts, but they will not be able to grow beyond their funding available with a requirement to also build homes. We can enter into multiple contracts simultaneously with multiple firms, so that will increase our capacity within a year. When we talk funding, we are looking at an average cost of $250,000 for the construction of a new home, almost anywhere on the Navajo Nation. An attempt to do some quick math, $250,000 for 1,400 homes is a total of $350 million that would be required to clear our waiting list as it currently stands. So any funding that is provided through the ARPA funds will help, but they will not fully address the issue for any dollar amount short of $350 million. There was a previous conversation about $100 million, how many homes could be built for that amount, and that is somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 400 homes. So keeping that in mind, I can imagine that many of the delegates of the 24th Navajo Nation Council have questions, and I think the time can be better served treating the work session as a back and forth conversation. So I'd like to get into the questions right away. So with your concurrence, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start taking questions. Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Orline, what you've stated in your presentation, do you have any of that in any kind of written format? This is Speaker Damon.
I can put that into a written format, sir, as the questions are coming in, and I can send that over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. As soon as we get that information, colleagues will get that out to you. Again, this recommendation for the work session, colleagues, was to hear from the organizations on their best uh, foot forward on what they're wanting to do to get as many homes or recommendations on many homes to be built. So, without further ado, colleagues, with Mr. Zorline's closing of his presentation, I'll turn the floor over to members of the Naabik'íyáti committee. Good morning again to everyone. And as of right now, I don't have anybody in the queue.
Speaker Damon, this is Delegate Charles Newton.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Um, is first and foremost um, is I'm wondering, is the fire contained now in your area?
Not yet, Speaker. In fact, I've got about 10 hotshots right behind my house right now, who are still turning over the dirt and trying to put out some of the, some of the embers that are still there. The winds are not making it very easy, or they're not making it, any better. But we still have them here in around the area. And as I stated, right now, right behind my house, as I look out the window, I've got 10 hotshots out there.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm glad they're out there, and pray for them and their families that they're working continuously to protect that area as well. So with that, Madam Chair, Charles Newton, if you have a question on Navajo Nation Veterans Administration regarding their housing plan or housing initiative moving forward, the floor is yours, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Speaker Damon, and thank you, Mr. Zorline, for the summary that you have given us. I know that you have come before this committee before, and you have talked about the pending applications for new home construction. At this point, you have 1,433 pending applications. My first question is, are you planning to open up the application, the application drive again, to really get a full understanding of the need that's out there? That's my first question. My second question is, you did the math, which you did very well, by the way. 358,250,000 is how much would be needed to clear the list of the 1,433 pending applications. Can you tell me that of that amount, the 358,250,000 that's needed, about how much of that is currently in the in the Veterans Trust Fund housing program? How much money do you have there? And then what does that leave us total? How much is needed? And then my last question is, you said it's $250,000 is about average is what you're looking at to construct a new home for a veteran. Just to be clear, is that the fabricated hogans that was presented? So are we building one hogan for the cost of $250,000? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Charles Newton. With that, colleagues, is there any other comments or questions right now for Mrs. Orline? I don't have anybody texted in. If there's none, let me go back to you, Mrs. Orline. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just doing some quick math to be able to answer Madam Chair Charles Newton's question. Please bear with me just a moment. Okay. Based on the recommendations from the Veterans Advisory Council, I have been asked to get started building with the current applications before we start taking new applications. I think that recommendation makes sense because our current applications have been waiting at a minimum 24 months. the amount of time that it will take to build all of those homes and get to a reasonable point, rather, to be able to start taking new applications I would say 12 months before we start taking new applications. However, if the powers that be wanted to provide the Veterans Housing Program with additional funds to account for an influx of new applications, we could, based on that funding information, start taking new applications. Based on inquiries, we have estimates that in the first year of reopening for taking new applications, we anticipate getting in the neighborhood of 500 new applications. So what we want to be able to do is the applications that have been waiting the longest, start building those first based on the program's screening checklists that are contained and part of and related to the approved policies manual. The second question about what is in the trust account. Right now, there remains a total of $17 million in change. Excuse me, $18 million in change, some of which will be used to pay the program staff to administrate and operate the program. So that will leave roughly $17.6 million left in the accounts currently. So that would mean we would need a total of ARPA funds of $341,250,000 to be able to clear the wait list. The question about what is involved in the cost about these new modern hogans that are being built. That is, like I said, the estimated cost right now. We are working on a project proposal to be able to build a model of the first home, to be able to run it through the process actually being used for the construction to help us narrow down what those estimates are for the cost of construction. The one number that we do need to keep in mind, well, there's two numbers that we need to keep in mind that are going to be significant variables for the costs of construction. Location drives those costs. The cost of concrete, we cannot simply say that the cost of one 10-yard truck of concrete coming out of Gallup is going to be the same cost going to, let's say, Twin Lakes compared to Hawk or compared to Chinle, Rough Rock. The costs of transportation of those materials, those raw materials, greatly impacts the costs of construction. So we can't ever say that the cost is a set amount. Even if we're building the exact same home in two different chapters, the costs are going to be different. Using the pre-construction method, there is going to be transportation costs associated with moving the housing products from the manufacturing facilities, whatever location that may be, to their final destination. Those costs would still be incurred if we were building on site, what people commonly refer to as stick built. I refer to it more as custom built or site specific construction. They're all basically referring to the same thing. When we have material being delivered to a standard location for the construction of a product, those transportation costs associated with the materials become a fixed cost. They don't become a variable cost. Depending on how the contractor utilizes independent transportation entities to move the housing products to the finished site, that is going to have the variable costs associated. So we can say lumber in a fluctuating market could equal a certain value. We could say time of construction, labor costs equals the second value. Most of the raw materials products costs are staying the same, but availability is becoming an issue. When we put the entire package together, Now we are saying $250,000 per home. A year ago, we were saying 130,000. So you can see what the impacts COVID is having on the market in our estimates, which is why in any of these conversations, you won't hear me guarantee a price. We just simply can't do that. So the 250,000 is the estimate. We do base that estimate based on the construction costs of our 2-bedroom homes. We are planning on having available 3, 4, and 5-bedroom homes, but also included in that list of pending applications. Some of those were applications for new homes when the individual may have a home that simply needs to be renovated. So our costs for renovation will not be as high as $250,000. And that helps offset the cost of the 3, 4, and 5-bedroom homes. So that's what we are currently working on, including in our costs when we say $250,000 per home. Thank you for the questions, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that response, Mrs. Walling. That, colleagues, any other comments, questions at this time? I don't have anybody else in the queue. No one texting in.
Speaker Damon,
Yes.
Ms. Helena.
Good morning, Honorable Lona.
Good morning, sir.
Oh,
Yeah, I had a couple of questions for Mrs. Zerline. I just wanted to get some clarification. Mrs. Zerline, on the 1,400 house applications that you're talking about, you know, this housing veterans program started because of homeless veterans. So right now, with the number of 1,400, is that what you're saying, is that we have 1,400 homeless veterans? Or is it just a small percentage of that? And also on the program to start building these homes and getting the program together, where are we at with that as far as the last legislation that went through for the housing program? Have we decided on what we're going to do with hiring on a permanent person for construction for the housing? Have you got any numbers together for that we can use to put into this ARPA program? Speaker?
thank you very much, Honorable Lona. With that, colleagues, are there any other further comments or questions at this time?
Speaker,
Yes.
Icid-Bg checking in, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman. How are you?
Good, sir. Just
Good.
hearing the birds chirp and all, it's all good.
Yep. Great. With that, if there's no more questions, we'll go back to you, Mrs. Warling, for a response to Honorable Halona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Delegate Halona, for those questions. Currently, based on the numbers provided in my last report, of the 1,433, 1,112 are currently being indicated as homeless. There were 293 identified as in need of home renovations, and without those renovations, those veterans would end up homeless because the home is borderline unsafe to occupy. And then there were 28 veterans that were victim of a burnout. So they were identified in their application as burnout victims, but they are also qualified as homeless. So that would bring our homeless population total to 1,140, if I'm doing my math correct here. The renovation program was created in the last year in an effort to be able to salvage existing homes to prevent veterans from becoming homeless. And if we can salvage the homes for less than the cost of the construction of a new home, that becomes efficient use of program funding from my point of view. The policies, so the housing policies for new home construction and the home improvement or home renovation, they were approved by the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee as amended. So the only thing that we are waiting on now is some feedback from the legislation sponsor, Vice Chair Ray Smith, to see if we are going to make any additional amendments or changes to that policy. If we are not, what we have to do is amend the Veterans Administration's plan of operation to insert the new position to run the housing program, the program manager position. It is not currently reflected in the plan of operation. And based on the information that we have been provided from the Department of Personnel Management, any position that we intend to advertise and hire must be approved in our plan of operation. So in order for the program to have supervision and be operational, the plan of operation must be amended to include that position. Then we will need to be able to advertise it and find someone who meets those minimum qualifications to fill that position. At that same time, we'll be retaining the additional staff that are currently approved in the plan of operation for the housing program, in the efforts, in the hopes that when we get that supervisor on board, that staff is ready to start working under that supervision. I do not have a timeline on when that will happen. The last time the Veterans Administration plan of operation was being approved, it took a little more than 12 months to get that plan approved. So hopefully now, with the urgent need for having it amended to add that position, we would be able to get that plan approved much quicker. But I don't presume to know the workload of the legislative staff in prepping legislation, nor the workload of the committees to consider the plans of operation. So optimistically, I would say 6 months before that plan is amended and before the position is advertised and filled. Thank you for the question, sir.
Speaker, one more question.
Yes, Honorable Helena. Go ahead, floor is yours.
Thanks, sir. So 6 months, Mr. Zerline, to establish that position. The budgets are coming around for next year already. Are you planning on putting that in, including that position in the budget for this next year? And also for the additional help that we wanted to put extra personnel out at each agency? Is that still a plan? Mr. Zerling, Speaker?
Oh, Mr. Zorlang, let me come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that question, Delegate Helena. Currently, the housing program staff are going to be funded from the housing program funds, which is not general funds. So when we start putting together the FY22 budget, the budget will not include housing program staff unless there is directive coming from over have housing program with the addition of the program manager position will be over $500,000. So that will put our personnel line item in future budgets sitting at $1.6 million. That number does not include the rest of the line items necessary to operate the Veterans Administration. and $1.6 million is higher than our last several years' allocation of $1.5 million. So our budget requirement would go up roughly to a total of $2.1 million. So at this time, it is my opinion that it is fiscally responsible to have the program staff for the housing program paid for with the housing program funds. With any supplemental funding from ARPA, it's our current understanding that ARPA funds could be used for administrative costs of the program. I have no opinion one way or the other on using those funds for that purpose. The funds are going to be expended one way or another to support the housing program. So thank you for the question, sir, but that's where we stand as a program on those numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zerline. I appreciate it. Speaker, I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zorling, for that response. Colleagues, any other comments, questions for the Navajo Nation Veterans Administration at this time?
Delegate James here.
Good morning, Honorable James.
Yeah, additionally, Speaker,
Oh,
although staff, Sanigi, all members of the 24th Navajo Nation Council, although Shashkahasi, so Taisino, Kodo, Ea, Selasto has Anje, Ea, Kodo Bahati, Ako, Hane large sheet, Ea, this the last so did no. Bahane the store by years so, his words is Leko. Although at the Nito. The last so did no. Ea yield here. Because in Nahan the Nelako. A coco, what are Nihinanas in not on it Lenigiko. Hashi, Ashi, Oyo, Barcoba, Neslo, Oyo by your Nahi hot in the last one the Nigiko. A coco, what are Naneshiki, Akonde, Nanesan Sagi. I thought not Echo. Ya. Not Ani Jalingo, Jokut in a has Ako. Ako Kodo Bahadishnehiki ya 80 Law and Order Committee ARJA Tanasi National Honorable Eugenia Charles Newton Lines as the Dado Keone Honorable Otto Sodo Nana Shitata Dado Shiyato Honorable Eugene So Adoshna Ash Honorable Edmund Yazi Akoko Ohad Ad LOC Ajitanasi Tando Staff Lenigi Lorena Spencer Dota Staff Lenigi Hut Epitin Neshako Oko Aji has Anegi Nadine Hitaton it's a lean Ado Bahi Eko Hane Large Shi Adole Ba Yasil Tito Nihil Ishan Aholia Selin Eko Adada Beno Ako hot Bahna Dil Kido Law and Order Committee Lead Lenigi Ako Legislation 0052-21 Hidatan Change Ako Work Session Deep List Deep Nego Hot Law and Order Committee has under Ilia Selin Ako I don't need a response back from Mr. James Zerline because he did already provide the response at our work session at LOC Ako. But I just want the people that are listening, also constituents throughout the Navajo Nation, to know that we did ask a lot of questions and we did get a lot of response from Navajo Nation Veterans Office. The audit of the Navajo Nation Veterans Office has creating another office. Policies and procedures, bylaws, Nana, or charts with the no construction workers. la je ya ba ya sil to need ya kodo hashin so halet ti de ni his last son leniki kwaiki do he host out ya bana huit ado do he host out hala ba neta so kut out so just do ba na des kid ko because the last so the quishi ya o je kid hat ko border town dog ahotes ano wache ako kaya tapit ojo slatin kaya sanelo akon yi keda hat akon hidden as last so dan lini akoko de kwai gila iya ihit o yodo papa need ida akodo de nebe kaya hahozo bi hahozo kwai gid iya ba yel tie late o jen his last so dan lini keda hat any gila iya kodo do ba yel tie da just the snow sto iya ba hasti sli ko jo hashin so in leda kina hal ko da beso sa last so ade asati beso ba baja dan liado asati behanata hosta ko had this nido nana veterans organization has ko in le kina hal ko beso ade jo hot is ni his last so ba basen ko ado nana koje hoz do ha ho do has anje adon leje yo toje do ashin bi toje ha ho do na has ko do hot out hata huistogi Naabik'íyáti ki do ba haitzi le ko ado din has since the last thought and linigit o hayut home site lease bit no ko dit never kaya ha ho so bi yika hajo pa ding zen ko ado nana hasit eshin hiten sa de nis asa hata je to asa ta mato ta bejetan lo akot abiyata ho ko kode has tweedo sani das leo sad linigi hashin kala abini nat sad linibe as yes ta has nelo do yes ta has ta hanni ko honda te in his hold ko hashin eshin kaya te yoke ni his last ko to ta bit nido aje hawan cha to ne home site lease te ne hot out hawan na to lease te ne ko leje the benal posta jota fosigi do ya hosan se kesta hit hosan se kesta benado visit sha do listo kaya ya sa hosan so kot stone his last phone linigi ya da ko beninat ko hot do beninat ya hot na sha do hot si yel ba onko na to hatte sha Johnny go hot hashit eshin his last phone linigi na va sto ko ado hashin eshin ton his last ton lenigi anade nise kodo de ne be kaya people de ne be kaya ho to bi kun ya hawan cha do nis wakot out habo honet za nadan hito ning de the last ton lenigi is it's na hot it's leni na hot bin ya zel engine apa ni yeti git yedo ani hot ibni nat o je hawan sa ani sa sen yede je en the last hoba is en leni je yana start to list chokot ibni na o jo hawan sa in ke jo no sto hot is the last so sa ta holo ko adonana hashit eshin his the last so sto hajo ba den den sa chinen leni da zaka be ya hosh ko of course de na nation lini kito apis as ho de hat das is lini bit na hot beniya ya da kito aka da lo has ani de en yazin has hota hot ho aba ni yedi ki sansen benina o je ke hoit sha chine ke has jokot so ba yasil ke lini ko adonana ni the last so ba chine da holo da ne se dan ban linigi sto de to haisit kin lini bandot haisit kin on tagi bandot one of our veterans has more than 4 or 5 young kids under the age of 18 jo kut sto ba hasi tri do ba yel lin ko ada ba po honet ko hasit eshin his last sto se quedo ashiga iya inan lenegi den hot has tindo san long hot ba chin holong and says just the last on long ko ama the last on lindo just the last on lingo hot iya iya ba chin ya ta hos to sa hot ke ta hat ko adi nan jahigit ana kiho kin lenigi sa ito shabahone zan hala isa chin asla hasta bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, to shabahone zada. Johnny go hot so sa ya yasti no what in has anigi Naabik'íyáti ko ado nan hasit asian thoughts in his last so based on linit kohen shane de ya ebigen helia ko ado abtai na hanod ya based on sa heliedo sa asa based on this on hot so this na has on his last so ko quietly has any base of it on not hiki do base yande yi like eben na ya ito akot ado hawan lini ki chokedo sa todo ya dino hasta chokot ado ben ha o zi li ko ye ko sanjit ya na ha ba yasil tio his itish asin so she ha sin so is not ko need indoor an haba yield here ko ko basement an need lini hot na haba an see case in his last son no seni ko adon hilaj not an in lini ki president nan so kill na das vice president lies or things to hot an sa case ko hot out o ha huge ni kaya hata hasnen sto hot nas nelet nas nelo ko okotat ego ta ba yata sil ko jo NHA has under now for housing authority kaya pata pahata has ne to things and that sto kaya biche beta os kaho to ho one ede leta kotat ho kaya ta sin se last so ha one lini kaya lini pahata has oh shit asho that kin ho banda to nesni his last um o wan este yok he do ke ya este yok he di gi si hot ba ilia si so jone di ni go hot so na ha ba ye ki le ko cho NHA do ke ya hinezen do to ka na nes adole I leta jo ko sto ko economics it na hot ko division of economics na nes hat no sa ni go ko ke ya le ni o ha you hat ha do ko open net dinas nel ko okoko edo hashit asian okay ya na hata ha so don his last so kin ba ta hoto ni lo hat out ya ho ye de think ke ta hat on ye big betra ya da ta khato listi ni go so hat na haba na ha ba khai zi to na big ya ti ko law and order committee ni ni ko hat his on ado ya when Zago season of as hosting social not Mosini Gito the speaker. I will go ahead and end my message here with in regards to our work sessions that we had at Law and Order Committee and the discussion that we had with Mr. James Erlines, and many of these questions were already answered. So I don't need to hear a response. I just wanted to do a recap to make it known to our Navajo veterans and families out there of how LOC took care of our part to address a lot of these issues that have been brought up. And eventually, when this legislation comes before Naabik'íyáti, we'll have some lengthy discussions on it again as well. So with that, thank you, speakers and members of the 24th Navajo Nation Council. Yeah, God bless you guys all. God bless our veterans. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments, Honorable Vince James. That, let me go on down. I have Honorable Elmer Bg. Honorable Elmer Bg, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Speaker. Shaway, other members of the Naabik'íyáti Committee, other people that are on the line too. So, yate pene. Other Mr. Sirline and veterans that are there. So, yate pene because my question regarding this veterans fundings and veterans housing. But not just keep those distance. And again, yeah, I think to me that if you can make a home, I've seen the plans where I believe that I said this before that if we can make one bedroom home, which is not suitable anymore, it seems that we could be wasting a lot of material. You know, why can't we just start off with 2 or 3 bedrooms, you know, or three bedrooms? Because I think that there might be even their grandkids that can take care of them. But upon that case, and at least they can say that this is my child's home, this is my grandma's home. That upon that case, and is she can get the sacrifice of their time and their life out there. Even now, yeah, I want to skip it. Why do I have to make it to only 2 bedroom or 1 bedroom? You know, it's just to make start off with their footing foundation with the 3 bedroom, which is more the cost savings instead of just making 1 bedroom home and then you have to make an addition again later on. All that. Oh yeah, if on this case, I think it's better that way. It has English, but I think they deserve that. Because that echo, I don't know. I'm not sure if it's gonna be still the whole gun. Um, that's the plan of making the whole gun home. I'm not sure if it's still like that or not. It is. I just curious. There's 2 questions that I have. Speaker, thank you.
That colleagues, any other comments or questions right now? Mr. Zolai. Everybody else in the queue?
Eugene, so
Eugene, so floor is yours.
yeah, this I don't know. I shouldn't get the shit of the shit down home, not that we need, not that we, she's the last soap. Uh, the all comment straight to one of the things that we need to really consider as council delegates. It was um, recommended to the chapter official back in the early 2000, I reckon, at Twin Arrows by Chief Hopi. At that time, they were told, and the leaders were told, that there needs to be something done in regards to a lot of complaints piling up within the district court. And most of them, as we're aware, and everybody knows, in regards to land issue, livestock issue. So, Craigie, we made a mistake back in the time. I guess the council, whatever was produced to the council at the time when when permits and leases were introduced. At that time, people back in the 40s, were not really aware of the language that was written on the permit or lease. They just had a feeling after winning the war against the United States back in 1868, when they conquered what they wanted to come back on the nation, where they were born and where life began for them. So to me, they feel I feel they won that war. When they came back to the land where they were their ancestral and their indigenous right, the lease and permit came to them not knowing what it really meant. So they just figured that's where they live and that's where they are told that no, it's a right for them to live in the area and to have livestock. They were not really educated and they just took it. And at that time, families or get all together, all the mom and dad's siblings. That permit is used for everybody. Yeah, with our Constitution, yeah, AB. That's how it was monitored. The People's Clan system, where everybody lives in a positive way of life in harmony. Kaya kesi ashahana ne dahil no ada date kada silya. So everybody knew where every clan lived at that time. Like I always stress here in Chinli where and the Kia Ani Sanichikin and little ways a torch the soft to the cheat. So what I know we recognized and all the elderly recognized it that way. The other so that's how it came to be where when we came back from the long walk. So as time changed, like I said, the permit lease were introduced without knowing what it's really meant. After so many generations later, our kids began to read and they found out what it really meant. As an example, I have a family, when I was a grazing committee, they were all in their 80s and their 90s, but they still don't want to do what their mom said to them and what the grandma did on a grazing permit. Even though the second generation from that family, another cattle, another Naligi, it's all cattle. It's in your name, you got the right to do whatever you want to. They need, even though they're saying that to them, but the elders, the older folks, they said, no, this is with my siblings. There's a few of us left. So that's how they understood it. But now as we know how to read and write, we learn to know what's on that permit. That's what all causing this whole dispute complaints across the Navajo Nation. I've been stressing how can we change it to make the people live with a clan plot there. There are areas across the Navajo Nation where you see lights. In that area, that clan lives. They have their own recreation, their own church, their own business, their own grazing, or their own farmland, like a little chapter or a little town. And that's how it is across the Navajo Nation. I don't know when we're going to understand that or when we're going to see that to see what we can do with the lease and the permit language. The permit language, lease and permits. It needs to be changed if we're going to keep our Constitution going. Otherwise, we're fighting each other. That brothers and sisters, we're going to forever fight because of that language. And we're going to forever fight because we want to be the owner. Ownership wasn't a part of the Navajo Nation. That's where we got caught up in from the long walk back to the reservation to here, and we got complaints against one another, and then restraining order against one another, our brothers or our own kids. And I don't know when we're going to ever consider to change those language in some way where we can put that back into our life. And that's what we're always saying. We're always stressing it, but we're not doing anything about that part of it. So that's it. I started out the house card. This is a key that it. Because from mother was there, there was on up in this time. I'm not calling the key to neither. I shot what's now. I shot the house up. So neither. Oh shit, it's my name. Everybody else has no business on it. So that's what we became, big monsters. With with that land, which permit and lease on whoever's name's on it is the owner of the Navajo Nation. Any others, they don't have anything to say so. That's how we're at right now. That's how the code is. And we discussed that the other day with Mike Halona. I have stressed it again and again, but nothing has ever shown up yet that with the land which that needs to be changed. It's a must. It's really vital to change these words, but otherwise we're going to be fighting each other in the future. Our kids, our grandkids. It is obe hostile. I want the council delegate to hear me, and I want everybody that's listening to hear me and really go and meditate on it and really think about it. What can we do? This is our life. This is our kids, the future. We need to do something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eugene. So that, colleagues, I don't have anybody else in the queue at this time. If there's no one else, Mrs. Orline, I can go back to you. I know those are comments. And maybe if you want to go ahead and just close out the presentation, then we can go from there. Mrs. Orline, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Delegate Elmer Begay had some questions. I apologize, I'm in the middle of a coughing fit right now. Okay, his questions were relative to the home design and the size. Excuse me. So these new home designs, right now they are default at 2-bedroom with a full bathroom inside the home. We have 2 different variations of the 2-bedroom based on square footage. The smaller of the 2 is 900 square feet. The larger of the 2 is 1,200 square feet. The floor plan layout is almost identical. We started with the 2-bedroom in lieu of any studio or 1-bedroom floor plans, but the homes can be built that way depending on what the veteran chooses in this case that they want. But we start with the 2-bedroom. The concept, the premise is as the veteran ages, they may require live-in aid, live-in assistance. So the veteran would be able to occupy a bedroom and that assistance would be able to occupy the 2nd bedroom. And as I mentioned, there is a full bathroom inside. The entire home is built ADA accessible. So if the veteran is currently in a wheelchair or develops a disability later in life that requires them to be in a wheelchair, there will be no modifications required for the home. The home was designed for the occupants to age in place without having to do any additional expenditures, either by a program or by the occupants themselves, to bring the home into a condition that accommodates any disabilities. The 2-bedroom plans are expandable. So they were designed that if we award a home to an individual that's single or married but does not have any kids yet, we can only award the home based on the current family composition. but we designed the home knowing that the homes are going to, excuse me, that the families have the potential to grow. So the home needs to be able to grow with it. So there are 3, 4, and 5 bedroom designs. I just don't have those finalized just yet. Within the next 3 weeks, I should have final construction drawings on those. But the homes are going to be awarded based on family composition at the time of the application. And like I said, if at the time of application, the award was the largest size was a 2 bedroom, and then the family grows, the veteran can pay, or the occupant can pay to have an addition put on the home to be able to accommodate the larger family. So I do encourage anyone, council delegates, staff, anyone listening on the call that's interested in seeing the designs and the process to come by the Veterans Administration Central Office in, say, Benito, New Mexico, on Highway 264, the big blue warehouse building. Some people may remember it as the Navajo Westerners Lumberyard facility. We'll give a tour of the process, walk you through the mock-up that we have sitting indoors right now, and allow you to take a look at the different floor plan layouts with the conceptual designs that we have. I think based on the feedback we've gotten for the people that have seen the drawings thus far, it helps to actually see the drawings than trying to imagine it. It helps walking through the 2-bedroom model and seeing how these homes will look and how they'll feel, as opposed to trying to imagine it. So with that, Mr. Speaker, Delegate Bg, thank you for those questions. Mr. Speaker, back to you, sir. Thank you.
Speaker, I have a follow-up question. Delegate Bg.
Delegate Bg, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Sirlein. Thank you for your response. So what's the cost of those homes that you're talking about, the square footage? What is the square footage cost on it? Speaker, did you get my question again?
Yeah, does that conclude your question?
Yeah, that's my question.
Okay. With that, Mrs. Orling.
Thank you for the question, sir. Like I had mentioned earlier in the presentation, and I apologize, I don't know if you were on at the beginning when I mentioned that, our average cost that we're looking at is still $250,000. Given the fact that we are looking at 300 square feet less between the models, the cost could be in the range of 20,000 less for the smaller model as compared to the full 250. But again, those costs are going to be dependent on where the home is built. Given the interior walls and the exterior walls, the framing costs are almost negligible. The amount of lighting, not utilities, I'm sorry, the fixtures for the bathroom, cabinets, everything there pretty much remains the same. So it's the biggest single line item in the cost between the models is the cost of concrete. So that's where we're sitting with those costs. 250,000 is still the average. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Orling. That, colleagues, any other further comments? If not,
Speaker,
Mrs.
this is
Orling.
Delegate Charles Noon.
Yes, Madam Chair, Charles Newton.
I'm sorry, Speaker. I was a little bit confused because I was actually planning to ask that same question as well. When we're talking about a home, I guess at $250,000, and this is a fabricated hogan, is my understanding. You know, we have to look at the cost for the square footage of these homes, and that's exactly what Shanella Delegate Elmer Begay asked. So the response is 300 square feet less, and then it's 20,000 less, which doesn't really answer the question. How many, and perhaps I missed this answer, but how many floor plans are there? And when we're saying 300 square feet less, what is 300 square feet less? Is it less? Is there two floor plans, big and small? And is the big hogan, is it like 1,500 square feet? So if we're doing 300 square feet less, is that 1,200 square feet? So if you could just tell me what the square footage is for each of the floor plans that are available. Thank you.
Thank you. That, Mrs. Orline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. So there are two different floor plans for the 2 bedrooms. There is a floor plan for the 3, floor plan for the 4, and a floor plan for the 5-bedroom design. So there are 5 different floor plans. The square footage of the smaller 2-bedroom home is 900 square feet. The square footage of the larger 2-bedroom home is 1,200 square feet. The difference in the sizes is when you look at the exterior walls, the smaller is 14 feet to a side, the larger is 16 feet to a side. So when you reduce the sizes of the length of your sides on your octagon, it reduces your overall square footage. In this case, that number works out to roughly 300 square feet. The 3, 4, and 5-bedroom designs are all roughly 2,400 square feet. It is basically the addition of a mudroom that we call it a laundry room in some cases. Some aspects of the drawings call it a mudroom. So if the veteran wishes to have a washer and dryer and a deep sink, there is capacity for that. But then to include the additional bedrooms, it is basically the addition of a second octagon that contains a second full bathroom. So when we go above the 2 bedrooms for the 3, 4, and 5 bedroom, there is also the addition of a second bathroom. I was trying to do some quick math, but when I talk numbers, I can't do math at the same time. So average cost per square feet at $250,000 for the 2 bedroom at 1,200 square feet. I need to double check my math because that just worked out to $208 a square foot.
This is really high.
COVID is the direct result of that cost. Pre-COVID in the residential markets, in some of the developed areas, Albuquerque, places on the East Coast, we have been looking somewhere in the range of $65 to $80 per square foot. So when we talk prices per square foot and the impact that COVID has had on that, when we look at that number, an increase on the Navajo Nation ranging in an area from $80 to $100 a square foot up to now $208 a square foot. We're almost doubling the costs. So that is the reality of the situation. And that reality is not specifically labor, but it's material costs, supply and demand, and the ability for the plants to produce the lumber, for the mills to cut the boards, for transportation to be able to ship, the cost of production of steel, everything involved with that, transportation of raw material and finished product. That all ties into the gas market. And that's what makes our costs get so high and why it becomes so important to find ways that we can cut those costs. And right now we think that those housing manufacturing facilities are that answer. So if the housing material market stabilizes and starts to return to a pre-COVID norm, then we would expect to see those average costs start coming back down. Since the market, with all these governmental funding injections, increasing the prices, and then governments such as ours spending dollars at those higher prices, I don't expect that the markets are going to start returning to pre-COVID norms anytime soon, if ever. We may continue to see inflated prices easily for the next 5 to 10 years. As long as there are people willing to pay those prices, the $40 for one 4x8 sheet of OSB compared to $13 pre-COVID, that's everything that we have to take into consideration. The sooner we can start building and doing things now before we see any further increases in prices, the better off we're going to be. Any delays, we may end up paying that cost in increased prices in areas of the markets that have not been realized yet. So I hate giving estimates, but it's the best thing that we can do at this time. And the numbers are ugly. There's no denying that. $208 per square foot for a residential structure, only for a 2-bedroom home. A year ago, I would have said that that's outlandish. When we start talking $200, we start talking about the commercial construction market. And that market now is looking at $600 to $800 a square foot. It becomes unreal on what we're trying to do. And it's going to impact not just housing on Navajo, but all construction. And we are going to feel that pain for a considerable amount of time. But I'm digressing from the question. I apologize. Madam Chair, I hope I provided the clarifying information. 5 different floor plans with the various square footage and what we're looking at average cost per square foot. Thank you.
Speaker, I have a follow-up question on this delegate again.
Naabik'íyáti, go ahead.
Thank you for that, Mr. Sherline. If you're doing a 2,400 square foot house, and if you're making it at $300 per square footage to make a 2,400 square foot home, it's going to be over 700,000. So that's the reason why I was questioning that, and even a 40 by 24 home is barely 300,000. So that's the way I would, if you can go by $300 per square foot for to make constructing a home. So and then if you're gonna make a whole gun, you're wasting a lot of materials, because you have to cut the angles and all that plywood, the whole plywood, you're gonna have to cut it. Or if it's gonna be a OSB, you're gonna have to be cut it, and all those sheet rock, they have to be cut at angles. So there's a lot of waste to that. And this standard home is usually by 24 by 32, and the whole thing, you can use the whole OSB 4x8 plywood, and even the lumbers have to come in all in places. If you can use that, the figures by four footers and 2 footers. So it's, if it could be all the standards right now, as far as I know, that the walls, exterior walls are all gonna be 16 on centers now. If you go by that, the exact home that you're gonna be building is gonna be 24 and 32 and then 38 and things like that. So I was wondering how you keep coming out with this different size of hogan. If you want to try to do a cost savings or cost effective, like they say. So that was the reason why I was asking, Mr. Sherline. So I think I don't know where you got that 300 square footage. Like you said, it's $60 to $80 on the coast, where hurricane hits and the West Coast, and and then coming over here, the cost increases. My questions. I still have a lot of questions on it, Mr. Sherline. Thank you.
Thank you, Nabik'íyáti. Let me move on down. I do have two new colleagues in the queue. Honorable Nabik'íyáti, then Honorable Charlene. So, Honorable Nabik'íyáti, floor is yours.
Yeah, it's Che. Good morning. Ado kudo daisnil tsagi. Kudo hawan bayat ki e obahatis. Ahol jishko o ala pe betang hit ko deepen na hit hatni ko o hol jish. I believe our veterans needed homes like yesterday or a year ago, but yet we're still. I'm not sure. Another month we'll have another excuse to another factor to increase the home price by another 100,000. That's about it. It does indicate that there's $17 million that's available. 17 plus. Oh, first of all, is there any presentation document that I can share with my local veterans organization? I'm requesting for a written report on this particular report, speaker. Ecuador, I'd like to share that because we're in the process of the planning meeting and chapter meeting at the local level. So as I always indicate that I share these documents and forward these documents to the local chapter officials. And for this one, for sure, I'll be sharing this with the local veterans organization with all my 5 chapters.
Just sorry to interrupt you, the speaker. That was sent out. There was a document that was forwarded to us, and we sent that to you at 11:09 and to the rest of the colleagues. FYI.
11:09. Okay. The only one I have is the Division of Community Development.
It's just an email, Che, from Mr. Manuel Rico.
Yeah, I mean, that's just an outline of about 2, 4, 6, 7 outline of, we're talking about a $358 million request with only 8 email outline. I think we got to do better than that. Especially if it's just written on because there needs to be a justification of the $250,000 per home. And the reason why I could need it, brother, Mr. Icd-Bg, housing improvement programs. If the Veterans Administration continues to struggle in establishing the housing program, maybe we could request NHA or HIP program to. They already have some models that they've been building and they have built. I mean, why can't we reach out to them and ask them to allocate this particular projects, housing projects, so they could maybe have a sit down with the NHA, if not the Housing Improvement Program, if not Division Community Development. They also have a housing program available. So ADAJ, Kodo certain amount of allocation of housing allocation to each of the region, because it does indicate 1433 pending application for new homes because ishi aja hajo penal go hit ashin kodo ishi that is established that the dollar figure gauge earlier ako ADG kwake hajo adol listo adil ni jo ikhun siniki atira ako na halit AED atin that jodot atin that hot and dishmila ahit eda kodo bayast to bahas do baby catch Italy do catch yasti oshit no sazad lindiki on hal Nahalie Godit of Obesh English, but now sometimes I hesitate to make comments on anything that has to deal with veterans. So, about what end? It just seems that the 358 million is just clearly just was divided up by the 1433. Based on Linigi, divide up Bilia. I don't could have been Bansaha case. I mean, you have different soil testing, the Bayadati, and then you got the factoring in the power line and the water line as well. Those are some areas I believe that if we sit down with the NTUA, I'm sure we can convince them to get these power line and water line into these veterans' homes. I think those are some plans that we're trying to hear out from our veterans program. So literally, I mean, 358 million for our veterans, which is probably more than that. But the veterans housing program, I mean, this has been in the works for the past 5 years or something, but yet we haven't developed that particular program. Ada Eben Kodo Veterans Administration Direct Service to Shno by yesterday. Akoko Ada and the Washington Lindiki Halid Lasato based on Niti Ato. What is our Veterans Administration doing in reaching out to the state and the federal government? I know each of the state has been receiving a certain amount of funding. We did get a listing from the state of Arizona on Friday, and how much of it is the Navajo Nation veterans reaching out to the state, and if not to the federal government, on the need of these homes. So the reason why I say this is aside from me sharing this particular document to the local veterans organizations, it's just our justification, the need of a full report to the state and the federal, especially the federal government, because they're the main one. They should be to be responsible in establishing these homes. The Veterans Administration at at Congress and the federal level. The Navajo Nation Navajo Nation based on each supplement and I mean, if that is the amount of funding, 358 million, I think the Navajo Nation should be in the position to ask for 358 million to the Veterans Administration at Congress level. And I believe the 1433 is not all of it, because we have more than 10,000 veterans on the Navajo Nation, and a lot of our veterans are not even applying. For one thing, is that it's too much time consuming, and some of their applications were lost, and then they're being asked to reapply again. So I guess maybe just add another 1,000 to this listing as how much veterans are in need. So those are adamant. Again, they continue to do follow up on their application, and I believe that a lot of our Navajo young kids, especially young kids, again, they just are getting out of the military service, are also in dire need of homes because they just go back into their parents' home Aja mato bjada ois nada has hanada huiljish. Koko eben go maybe do a follow-up meeting request, Mr. Speaker. Maybe give them several more a week or so to have them develop a clear report on how they strategically are seeking the funding, and then how these requests of funding, especially the cost of the homes, if they have any requests reaching out to even home builders. I'm sure $350 million. I mean, maybe a regular home builders could be able to help chip in, because this is for veterans. Veterans who don't need a sheet aja. I mean, I'm sure they can be able to have a reduced cost services that they could do if we could be able to reach out to some of these home builders that builds homes in the like Albuquerque or Phoenix or Flagstaff. They're ready to help, but yet I'm sure they can be able to because like NTUA, I mean, I look at NTUA. I mean, they have a program that's called Light Up Navajo. I mean, what they're doing is reaching out to companies across the United States to help bring in a lot of resource, manpower, to help construct a power line to Navajo people that are waiting for electricity. They do that on a yearly basis. I mean, why can't our veterans program also do the same as well? I mean, reaching out to veterans organization out there. I think there's a whole a lot of veterans organizations that could be able to help out in building a lot of these homes. Again, it's just a recommendation that I have, and my thought of why the push in trying to say that the direct responsibility of the federal government is really needs to be the position, and maybe it's time for our veterans to file some type of a court intervention to say that I mean, we're being neglected so much by the federal government, and that these are some areas that we really are in dire need of. But again, I'm just asking for a full detailed report, written response, maybe provide them a follow-up meeting, and sincere see if what NTUA is able to contribute, what NECA can contribute, what Land Department can contribute. And I always say, I forgot the name of, I mean, the legislation, the council resolution, where it does indicate that veterans shouldn't be able to be paying any these costs associated in getting a home site lease. What I hear from them is that, I mean, well, who's paying for it if the veterans are not going to be paying for it? But it's a policy that's in place on behalf of the veterans. And then elderly that's over 65 on up, utilizing that. I mean, how much can the veteran, I mean, the NTUA, NECA, NHA, HIP program, CDC, and you name it, all across. I think there should be a group effort or that type, unless we're just solely focusing on a company that's going to be getting this funding, and I'm sure there'll be more questions on that particular process. But nonetheless, again, there needs to be a better way to have a proper planning that our veterans be getting these homes as quickly as possible. So, Ecuador request speaker.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Honorable Icd-Bg. With that, let me go to Honorable Charlene. So, Honorable Charlene, so, where's yours?
Oh, yeah, شجعت يا ناند to our staff adult shinant 24th Navajo Nation Council Naabik'íyáti committee adult Mr. Zwerling yad and he the Schneiderle. I know that there were with the funding and the inflation costs. I'm wondering how this projects into the pending projects. Na kita mo yan Shania Mle Ashagwanda, an elder and a veteran. They asked me to check into the status of their homes. The question is that yan da a la as li the application ada ho one ba adol ni no a aja veterans department on a ko the daily one hard to she not adult clean up the area but don't need a ko this that atido baal neta, and they pretty much got the ground stabilized, patted down, cleared, and the elder was told to get the home where your home is going to be built, get it prepped and ready. And the following day and the following days and weeks, nobody had shown up to get the house constructed. And I'm sure with the pandemic playing a vital role in the halt, I'm wondering how with the next plans, especially with the funding coming, ARPA funding, director with the homes that are waiting, that are pending to be built. What is the step and procedure? What is the projection on those homes now that are halted? And with the inflation cost, how does this affect the home, the people, the veterans that are expecting their homes to be built tomorrow that have been waiting months? I believe this veteran, he did mention that he was notified in April of last year that his home was going to be built with the following days, and that was when him and his family, his kids, had prepped the area, and nobody showed. So, how many of these homes are on that list, on that halt, and how does the inflation, how is this going to affect it? And then what is the plan and the target date to get these projects completed and started and completed? I wasn't too sure what to tell the veteran at the time. Anita, I must have missed it, but then I apologize. As my colleagues did state, it is the beginning month for planning meetings and chapter meetings. I would also like that in the written report. If we can get that inclusion as well. And right now, there's so much challenges that we're facing as a Navajo Nation with the pandemic. But they're contributing to the household income. They're still on furlough, and they've been laid off. And so some of this, it does affect every household that are waiting, and it contributes to the high number of the homeless veterans and having them to pretty much live with their nearby relatives, distant relatives by nearby border towns. how much, I want to know how many of these homes are held up, and how much of these funds that are being requested are going to be allocated to begin the construction of these homes. I don't know that as link.
Thank you. With that, let me go ahead and go back to Mrs. Orline for any kind of response. Mrs. Orline, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the question originally came from Delegate Elmer-Bg. I don't think I said $300 per square foot. If I did, that was a slip of the tongue, but it's 208 is the number that we're currently calculating with the math. So on a 2,400 square foot home at the cost of $208 per square foot, excuse me, that would be just under $500,000 for a home. That is still within the HUD guidelines for the cost of estimated constructions on the Navajo Nation. We already said that the cost for a 1,200 square foot home would be $250,000. And then using those same numbers, a 900 square foot home would be $187,200. And again, those numbers are all estimates because it's all relative on how far those costs of concrete is going to have to be transported and the cost of the actual home itself. Double checking my notes here. So yes, the number of applications that we have right now, that's physical applications that we have. That is not an accurate reflection of the number of homeless veterans of our Navajo veteran population. It's only the number of applications that we currently have. And over the years, now remember, I've been here since the summer of 2019, and this program started 2013, 2014. So there were a number of years that I was not here. That it is possible, and it is very likely, that applications got lost over the years. So when I did come on board in 2019, the housing program wasn't building any homes. We had not built a home in 2 years. The last home that was constructed was in 2017 by our program. That does not include the 10 homes that were constructed through the Southwest Indian Foundation contract. So I would concur with Delegate Icd-Bg's assessment that there are likely another 1,000 homeless veterans out there. I would also say that there's probably more. When we take a look at the number of total veterans that we can place a name to on our records and compare that to the veteran homeless population, we're looking at 13% roughly. And so by conservative estimates, we're looking at 12,000 veterans we can put a name to. Our real number is likely closer to 15 or 16,000. So that number needs to go up in our estimates for the homeless veteran population. But again, that 1433 is just the physical applications that we can count because they're here in our office. For Delegate Charlene So, can you please email me that veteran's information so I can look into that situation? If they were told anything about a home getting ready to be built in the last year, I am going to be very suspicious about that having come from any Veterans Administration staff. Because like I said, we had not actually built any homes since 2017, and we stopped taking new applications in 2019 until we could get the program restarted and get the policies and legislation associated addressed to be able to address all the audit findings from the 2017 audit. So I would be very interested to learn about that situation. And the plan to get started, we had wanted to be able to start going through our applications as soon as the program policies were approved by the Oversight Committee. And if I'm not mistaken, that was at the end of March. That might have been the beginning of April. I forget the date that it was approved. But because, and I'm trying to say this without pointing any fingers, but it was made clear to me as I'm listening to the conversations that the committees did not want the executive director providing operational oversight of the housing program, that they wanted that program manager to do all of that. And until we get that position, we cannot actually do anything with the program. So without knowing when we're going to start, I can't say when we're going to be completed. What I can say is right now, our estimates for time of starting and completing a home is 60 days. We are looking at from the time that we show up on site with the construction company to start construction to the time that we give the veteran the keys, 60 days. With the pre-manufactured process and the time that it takes to pour and finish and cure concrete, 60 days. And I encourage you to hold me to that, because I will certainly be holding our contractors to that. Based on subject matter experts in the field looking at these designs, that is what they're telling me is their estimates right now is 60 days. So when we start talking about how fast can we complete this list, how fast can we start taking new applications, it's all going to come down to when do we start actual construction. I wish I had a better answer, but that's where we sit. I agree that the federal VA should be providing more assistance. And it needs to be said now, since the question has come up again, there are certain individuals that are advocating at the federal level with the federal VA that the federal VA does not appreciate. And every time I enter into conversations with the federal VA to start providing services on the Navajo Nation, I have to start over because of advocacy that has been done by other individuals. 2 years ago, the federal VA was ready to close the door on the Navajo Nation. Right or wrong, that's where we were. And the Washington office and myself, we met with individuals up there at the federal VA and explained to them the situation. And they were, I'll say, understanding. They were certainly patient, and they were willing to work with us moving forward. It just becomes a matter of establishing and preventing people from sabotaging those relationships. I apologize for the use of the word sabotage. I'm not implying anything, certainly not anything deliberate, but when relationships are established and then somebody does something to ruin those relationships, I don't know what else to call those actions. But yes, the federal VA needs to be providing more services to our veterans here on the Navajo Nation. I don't think anybody disagrees with that statement. I know I am fully in agreement with that. And I would like to be able to divert more of my time towards being able to bring those resources here to the Navajo Nation, not just federal, but also state, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah. And to be able to do that, we need to have our collective house in order. We need to be able to show that we are capable of doing something on our own and that we have our act together, and what they're doing is augmenting what we are doing. They're bolstering their resources. And in this case, potential additional resources in the form of financial assistance for housing construction. I think that would be very important. But if we don't have an operational housing program, we can't sit there with our hands out asking for money that we don't know when we're going to start using. So the sooner we can start, as soon as I am legally allowed to start this housing program, that's when we will begin. And I apologize for going off on another tangent again. Delegate So, just one more time, if you could send me that veterans information so I can follow up on that situation specifically. Nobody from this administration should have told any veteran over at least the last 2 years, go clear your land because we're going to start building your home tomorrow. And I would really like any details that you have on that, any names of individuals that provided that information, anything that you have, ma'am. But thank you for those questions and for bringing that to my attention. Mr. Speaker, back to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That colleagues, let me go ahead and go back to the floor. Honorable Yellow Hair, floor is yours at this time.
Good afternoon, everyone, Speaker, and also the 24th Navajo Nation Council. I don't touch the scenario, but pertains to veterans. I'm just going to wait and pass on right now, and Speaker Shah for the floor. I'll wait later. Shah, turn the floor back to you. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much. Honorable Yellow Hair. That, let me go ahead and continue on down. Jay, Honorable Icd-Bg, go back to you.
Speaker, maybe it's just more making it open now. I'm not sure who is sabotaging the advocacy at the federal level. Obviously, the main person, which is I, have been advocating at the federal level, and it's disturbing to say it is really true that the federal government was going to close the door on the Navajo Nation. If that's the case, I'd like to have that in writing, and I sincerely will be able to go back and inform our Congress or delegations that this is how the veterans are treating the Navajo people. I'd like to ask for a written response on that one so that I can go back out. And the reason why I've been advocating for housing and direct service was based on two different Nabi resolutions, 23rd Council Nabi resolutions passed requesting for direct service on the Navajo Nation, and the current council, the 24th Navajo Nation Council, reaffirmed that particular direct service request on behalf of the Navajo veterans. The key main thing was establishing a direct service on Navajo. It's the having an office, and also the other legislation was requesting for a hospital, but there was more of a long shot. But direct service is the one thing that I have been advocating for. And I did make a report to the Veterans Advisory, Minority Advisory Committee. 8 individuals, I believe Mr. Sorline, I missed one of the meetings while he was there. I don't know if that was the time that particular position was outlined to them, but like I said, I'd like to get a written statement on that particular, that the Navajo Nation was going to get slammed doors against her. So and I believe that maybe some of the reasons why we're not getting anywhere in requesting for the direct service on Navajo, and that's what I've been pushing. And yes, you are probably the 6th or 7th veterans director, and that's another reason probably that we're not getting anywhere. Because since I got in, I've been working with a temporary directors, and you're probably the 5th or 6th one. But now that you're on contract, that probably has put you in a position to be here for the duration. So I don't see there should be no excuse to say that. Well, I just got on, I just inherit this situation, and that's another thing that we always hear. Because A lot of time when I say on record, meaning that these are some areas that I relayed the message to the local veterans organization and the chapter officials, and hoping that they'll, I don't know if there's a where they could be able to get copies of these recordings of what we talk about and share those and have the community, our Navajo people listens to them of how we I want to be on record, meaning that this is what I said at these meetings. Ecuador, because I'm talking directly with one of the senator staff, I believe, and I think that he is on the Armed Service Committee. So this will be another justification for me to really, I guess, beef up to Congress and the Veterans Administration. This is how we're being treated. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Naabik'íyáti. Is there any other comments, questions from the colleagues? I don't have anybody in the queue. If there's none, this is all. Brigade, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm trying to unmute myself. I think just by looking at this and pre-fact fabrication that's gonna be, I believe that there's gonna be a company out there that's gonna be putting all this, the whole wall together, and they're just gonna come in and then, like you said, you know, that the way the cost saving, it's already made out there. You know that it's gonna be the same size, the same build. It's just like that. So I know that there's cost saving for them, but they'll be making money out there somewhere. That money is not gonna be on the reservation because we have contractors here, we have builders here, but these people, I don't know who they are. I don't know if they're actually the carpenters, but these are already pre-fact and out there, just can bring them and then set them up. And the only contractors that we will probably have is the concrete. And if you can be building homes in the Dalcon area, you're going to have to come out with the concrete trucks will be coming out from Winslow, and then actually from Holbrook too. And right now, we're trying to work with building homes in the Dalcon area, utilizing the plant, the concrete plant here in where they're building the hospital. You know, they have a plant there now. They set it up, but the IHS cannot allow that. So, I'm looking at it to where is that the $300 square foot profit will be making out somewhere, and they're just complaining and put it up. And we have builders here, and these are Navajo Nation money. I would suggest that, you know, go with the local contractors that are here. They can go as low as, I just talked to them, they can go as low as today, even the way the market is, it can go as low as $208 a square foot. So somebody, Bilakana's out there making money out. It's going to be the Navajo Nation money making profit out of us. So any Bilakana comes onto the reservation, that's what they do. So I totally think that Mr. Sirline doesn't know the square footage on some of these homes. If he doesn't know, it's coming by somebody. This that sacrifice their time and then their life. This is their money. It should be used give it back to the Navajo Nation, not give back to Ghana out there somewhere. So that's what I think too. If he doesn't want to share a lot of information with us regarding the square footage, what's complete square footage, including appliance and what kind of appliance is it going to be, and something like that. You had to. All these contractors around here. That's what their question is about. So I think I think we have. I think the money that we have right now should be going back to the Navajo Nation. We have a lot of good contractors, the best carpenters that we have around on the reservation. So that's what my thought is on today, the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That, Honorable Amurge. Any other comments, questions, colleagues? If there's none, let me go back to Mrs. Zorline. Zorline, go ahead, floor is yours for response.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't much hear additional questions, but there were some comments that I think would be relevant for response. The numbers that we're getting are coming from Navajo-owned contractors. I have an obligation to follow the Navajo Nation procurement manual. I have a requirement to try and source from the Navajo Nation source list. We have there's at least 2 or 3 dozen contractors that are capable of building these homes on the Navajo Nation. So I've been maintaining all along that yes, this money needs to be invested into our Navajo companies, into our Navajo labor, and keep those dollars here on the Navajo Nation. We don't have contractors coming from off Navajo that are providing input on this for construction. It's all internal to the Navajo Nation. And like I said, these numbers right now, they're estimates. And I'm hoping amongst hope that these estimates are high, because it's better that the estimates are high than they be low. An estimate being high, if we budget for the high end, we're actually able to build more homes because the cost comes down. So it sounds outrageous, yes, but that's what the numbers are showing right now. And until we can actually start construction with these designs, with this process, we aren't going to actually know what the real costs are. So I wish I had different answers for you. I wish I had more precise information, but that's where we are right now. And I know that NHA is going to get into the numbers a little bit more in detail on their presentation. And they have charts and graphs that are from national construction associations on what's going on with the market. They will be able to show you in their presentations the hard data that supports where we are right now. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to answer questions. As always, I'm here to answer questions at any time. My email address is in the Navajo Nation's global address book. If you don't have it already, it should be on our webpage. That you are more than welcome to send me any questions any time of day, and look forward to those questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zorline, and thank you very much for being here with us this morning. We appreciate that. With that, colleagues, let's continue on down as we are moving on to our second presenters, and that's the Navajo Nation Division of Community Development, which is particularly the Community Housing and Infrastructure Department, better known as CHID. I don't know who we have on from either CHID or from DCD this morning. The floor is yours. Did we get a report? DCD? We did get a report from DCD, and when was it? That was sent out at 11:30 this morning, colleagues.
Yat, speaker, can you hear me?
Oh, can hear you loud and clear, Dr. Yellowman.
Okay. Excellent. Good afternoon, Shananta. I'm joined here with our team here, and I'll be co-presenting with the CHID Department Manager, Mr. Patrick Dalgai. Ado Shay Pearl Yelaman Yanshia and Shlinigi A Sanabitli and Shlindog is the son of Bashichin Tomahana Shiche Ado Hanagani Dashanella Ado Tunin is Dizadent Nasha. And just want to extend my appreciation and say good afternoon to our honorable members of the 24th Navajo Nation Council, to our colleagues on the call, and many listeners who have logged on or dialed in and who are listening on today's topic. We did send our presentation over. We've been working on this presentation. It's still in its preliminary phases, and we do have some modifications from the original presentation that we submitted, I believe, April 12th. So Speaker, I believe we are on a shared screen, and we'll go ahead and proceed, Speaker. So thank you. We did send the presentation to your office and to members of RDC. Go ahead and go next. Just a quick overview of what we'll be sharing and touching upon today. A little bit of history on the CHID department, a little bit of information on the organizational structure. We do have a need to address hazmat evaluation and removal, often just referred to as debris removal. Those are some of the requests that we get to our department and division, and burnout, assisting burnout. And I'll be touching on a little bit of that this morning or this afternoon. We want to just kind of demonstrate some of the accomplishments of the Icd-Bg infrastructure funding and the HIP housing funding. And then most recently, in preparation and in discussion of the American Rescue Plan, DCD CHID, we have been participating in the tribal consultations on behalf of the nation, and we have listed here some of the competitive grants that we plan to pursue. There's the HUD Icd-Bg infrastructure. We're anticipating an available amount of $280 million. The BIA HIP housing, we're anticipating an available amount of $100 million. And the HUD IHBG affordable housing, we're anticipating an amount of $450 million. We want to demonstrate in our presentation some of the funds that we have brought in the last 3 years here to the nation, and kind of demonstrate where those funds have been utilized or how those funds have been utilized. So next slide, please. Again, I am co-presenting with Mr. Pat Dalgai and may call on him for added details. But the Community Housing and Infrastructure Department is under the Navajo Nation Division of Community Development, and we operate under the Plan of Operation GSCO-27-08. And our goal is to promote and develop improved living conditions for the Navajo families and strengthen communities throughout the programs and for community housing. Next slide, please. Here are some of the tribal consultations that we recently participated in. We appreciate the opportunity to do so. We did participate in the BIA tribal consultation. Some of the recommendations that we submitted on behalf of the nation is we recommended that the BIA funds be distributed based on the tribe's population and land base. We also recommended that the Navajo Nation Housing Improvement HIP is already established with an existing mechanism to implement funds. We also recommended that HIP has a housing policy in place to construct new homes. We were already supporting that. we were already supporting the process in place. And we also acknowledge that HIP has a list of potential names already to receive new housing based on household numbers, home site lease, and available infrastructure. Speaker, I do want to add that some of the information that we disclosed on this presentation, we did omit names because we do have listings. And I just want to disclose that there was sensitive information, and we did omit the names, but there were some addresses there. So I want to be careful in this presentation, but acknowledging that we do have that information. And then lastly, serving burnouts, homelessness, and multi-generational and dilapidated homes. We also participated in the Icd-Bg tribal consultation. Again, we are advocating that the funds are distributed based on population, land base, and the tribe being most affected by COVID and the impacts of COVID. We ask that the funding be treated as an intimate threat category. And really that's what we advocated the most for. Last year, almost exactly 1 year ago, DCD CHID, when we were first experiencing the pandemic, we did write for an intimate threat grant in the amount of $3 million. Those funds were not allocated or not received. So as such, based on our recommendations to the Icd-Bg, we're advocating that those grants be revisited and redistributed. So that was our advocacy for tribal consultation. And then really importantly too, at the bottom of the screen, a waiver on certain regulations and statutes that make funds available or make funds flexible to implement projects. We'll go a little bit more into detail on that. We have some data here on the housing need, and this is based on another recent report on 2016. But NHA estimated that the Navajo Nation needs about 34,000 new housing units. We understand that NHA currently administers approximately 8,500 units. Of those, about 2,000 were not fit for living conditions. And we understand that families are living in overcrowded and substandard housing. As we were impacted by COVID last year, that's where we saw a significant amount of numbers and families impacted by COVID who were coexisting in multi-generational homes. So the need for housing surfaced quite a bit last year. And as such, we've been trying to remedy and address housing need. This slide here shows kind of the organizational structure of CHID under DCD, but the Community Housing and Infrastructure Department, we do operate under the funds. There are limited general funds, and those general funds house the department manager, an office specialist, a construction supervisor, and a carpenter. The remaining funds are federal funds that we rely on. We have little to no operational funds that allow us to address some of the housing needs. We operate with or under federal funds, and those federal funds are the HUD federal funds, which operates our community housing block grant program, and then our BIA federal funds operates our housing improvement program. The next slide, please. Prior to 2019, there was some decline in overall funding. Some of these fundings were the federal fundings that typically the CHID department relied on. But however, in 2019, we made it a priority. Mr. Dalgai DCD, and CHID, we made it a priority to seek as many funding opportunities as possible, and that's the red line. We started writing for grants, and we did bring in just a little under $8 million in federal dollars in the Icd-Bg category, and those are some of the funds that we've been utilizing. We did write for additional grants. As I mentioned before, we wrote an intimate threat grant, and we do plan to write for additional funds that are competitive from the funding sources that I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. Some of the milestones for the Icd-Bg for infrastructure related, the power line milestones that we were able to accomplish were 486 miles of service line. Mr. Dalga is online to speak a little bit more in detail to that. The water, wastewater, an additional 157 miles of service line for those funds in the last decade here. So next slide, please. Again, here's just another breakdown of the HIP funding that we've been operating under, and that's from 2011 all the way to 2020. And we have some ongoing pending projects right now. Next slide, please. These are some of the types of services that the CHID program receives. Some of these can be handled or addressed through the federal funds. Some require flexible funding or funds appropriated probably within the nation that could assist our department in addressing these needs. The HIP program received federal dollars for new construction, rehabilitation and renovation, roof repair, burnout, homelessness, and house wiring. We do try to utilize as much internal funds and operational costs when we receive requests for burnout and roof repair. There was a significant amount of requests last year under CS 73-20. That legislation requested for the 110 chapters to submit through a needs assessment on the rehabilitation and renovation. We did consolidate all of those assessments and packaged it into a scope of work, which allowed us to seek a vendor. And that's still available. We still plan to pursue that. And there's still continued requests for rehabilitation and renovation. We do communicate through our community land use teams throughout the Navajo Nation, and they do keep some data on the needs of rehabilitation, roof repair, and many of these items here, which I can go into a little bit more detail. So next slide, please. These are some of the funds that we plan to pursue. We want to be aggressive in pursuing these funds because they help leverage and expand the potential incoming ARPA funds that are coming to the nation. If we can add or leverage the incoming ARPA funds that are coming to the nation, we believe that we can just address housing need overall. So these are potential funds that will be available. There will be a notice of funding that we are looking out for, and we continue to be in communication with our Southwest offices and federal partners. So this is the $280 million that we anticipate and we hope to write for, and we are preparing some of our data to do so. Next slide, please. And then again, additional information. Here's some of the infrastructure and power line and communicate or partners that we have been working on and partners we have been working with. is the HUD, Icd-Bg, ARP funding, and the Navajo Nation CDBG program in CHID. Many of these projects the CHID department has been working on and work closely with the Navajo Nation communities and chapters. And we appreciate the chapters who have been participants of this. We actually are trying to complete 2 right now, going through the 164, and appreciate their patience and they're in dire need of these services. So a lot of the chapters communicate with the CHID department on the status of these reports or the status of these 164. So next slide, please. We also plan to seek the BIA home improvement potential funding amount or potential funding opportunity. And this will allow for construction of possible new homes. And again, these are some preparations we're making. We have a grant writing team that we have put together, and our grant writing team has been successful in the last 2 years. Next slide, please. This is just a continuation of the last slide here, but here's some of the questions that were asked in the previous presentation with Director Zerline. We do have some information on that, and I can speak to that and try to address some of the questions that were asked in the previous presentation. Next slide, please. Next slide. Just for the safety and sensitivity of this information here, we do have the HIP application list from 2018 to 2019, and the HIP office here in Window are still compiling the list from the 2020 and 2021. We did break it down by delegate region. And again, we want to protect the names and the sensitivity of this information here. But as you can see, we have an ongoing list. Next slide. And they are broken down by the delegates. And these are the applicants who would be eligible for potential housing. At the bottom of this slide here, you'll see a ledger, and you'll see on the far left that there were 49 homes that had one head of household member, all the way down to the bottom, which we had 2 that had 7 household members. I'm sorry, not head of household, but 7 household members. So we do have multi-generational homes needed, and we have all the way up to single individual unit numbers. We do have a breakdown of costs. I know that was brought up in the last presentation, and these are estimates. We do also have additional information that pertain to previous legislations that we were working on, but our CPMD staff, Mr. Preston and Mr. Andy Thomas, they have been working with myself, and we've been looking at what they rely on, a source called RS Means. RS Means gives some calculations and estimated costs on different types of materials and supplies, and we are looking at an overall total increase on materials and supplies coming onto the nation. So we do have some of that information, and we have been factoring those increases into our estimated costs. We also have been working with NECA to cross-verify some of these cost estimates, and but here at the bottom is just some estimated costs. Next slide, please. We have been working with the office of the Navajo Hopi Land Commission office. And again, we did omit some names, but here are some locations and the needs for those houses. And from the office, Navajo Hopi Land Commission office, also known as the former Bennett Freeze area, we do have a list of their needs and want to continue working with them and coordinating their efforts with our division as well, and have been communicating on additional funds and leveraging funds and adjusting the quality housing need for many of those families there. Next slide, please. Oops, that one might be out of line. So this is again, next slide. Next slide. Okay. Apologize, this slide 34 is out of line. But these are additional funds that we plan to pursue. There are the HUD, Icd-Bg, ARPA funding, but the anticipated amount is 450. It should be up there with the 280, but not now. Next slide, please. Originally, on April 12th, we submitted this plan here. For those of you who are viewing it, it was a 50-50 formula proposal for a housing need or request for ARPA in the amount of $200 million. With the 50-50 formula, we looked at all of the 24 areas, 24 districts under the delegates, and it estimated at around 8.3 million. 8.3 million. However, and that was the breakdown of, go back up to the slide where it breaks it down. Right there. This was the breakdown of the 200 million was broken down into the 24 delegate region, and the amount was 8.3 million. And with an estimated cost, this is an estimated cost of 130,000 per one home, that allowed us at a realistic number. At the time, April 12th, was a realistic number at 64 homes per district. With the year 1, year 2, and year 3, we estimated 64 homes divided into the 3-year ARPA timeline, and that was 21 homes per year, with a total overall number of 1,536 homes for the 24 districts. We started to pursue conversations with NECA. As you know, they're moving into a vertical build here. However, I must share that there's some strong limitations to that particular slide there, the 24 district map. And I'll share why in this next slide on page 27. Speaker and members of the council, we now realize that our numbers and requests and anticipated number of houses to be completed really depend on the land status per each district. Our goal with this slide was to start breaking down the 24 districts and really examining the land status in the 24 districts to provide recommendations in these areas. And this red circle here is just an example of the multiple types of land status within this red area and how we would need to address it. In essence, our original request on April 12th is only as strong as our ability to address the land status here. And as such, our original request at a 50-50 formula may not be as equitable if we cannot commit to those 500 homes in these areas that are heavily impacted by several land statuses. So we have rescinded respectfully the the 24 district map and the proposal to fully address to include in our plan mechanisms of addressing the land status. We understand from previous conversations and most recently the Lands Department's presentation yesterday, we have been in discussion with the Lands Department on possible recommendations for these areas. But until those can be fully resolved, I feel DCD that 50-50 formula would possibly have some limitations in its to be equitable in those areas. However, there are some recommendations that we do have and we do want to share today. Next slide. Based on our conversations with the Lands Department and what the Lands Department shared yesterday, there were 3 areas of home site lease. So even if we are able to move forward with our ARPA housing plan, there are some homes and individuals on the list that would apply. Those individuals who are on our application list would possibly qualify under number 1, that they would have an existing home site lease and they can enter into a service line agreement for utilities. Those are some of the requirements for applicants to get on the existing list that we have, and also working with the Navajo Hopi Land Commission requirements as well. Number 2, there are individuals who are in need of homes but may not have the home site lease, which is another second factor to our plan. If we reduce the total number of homes that can be, that we proposed, the original proposition was at 1,500. We are reconsidering that to reduce it to what DCD and the Lands Department can issue as far as home site lease sites. That was a major highlight in Mr. Halona's presentation yesterday, that they're estimating determine housing plan in order to address number 2, because there are a significant amount of families who are in need of housing but do not have the home site lease. And then again, there's the number 3, the no home site lease, and have not selected a location and must follow the entire process. These are individuals that we are encountering who may live off the reservation and are trying to move home, or maybe college students trying to return home, or individuals who are starting the whole process completely new. So next slide, please. Next slide. We're beginning to wrap up here, speaker, but our recommendations really are to address some procurement procedures as far as contracts, materials, equipment, and supplies. This has been a sensitive topic here, but NHA has focused on clustered housing. As such, DCD CHID, we've had to carve our way respectfully around NHA and address scattered housing. We would like to continue doing that. We are in some early communications with IHS. IHS does have an SDS listing and a ranking system to address their housing needs and bathroom addition. For example, they have a level 5 through level 0 to address their bathroom additions. And what they call a quality home with functional water systems is a level 0. With our team last year in place under the CARES Act funds, we worked with NTUA and NECA, and we addressed homes in level 4 and level 3. However, the level 5s are what IHS refer to as the legacy homes. Those homes are often dilapidated and may not be feasible to uphold or have a bathroom addition constructed on that type of a home. So we believe that if we continue working with IHS, we may be able to assist and address those legacy listings. And those are often in the scattered area as well. The scattered homes are what we often find through the chapter's needs, and the scattered listing is what we often find the local land use planning committees are often identify as high need. So we like to continue working on the scattered housing through CHID. Again, in closing here, our preliminary assessments, really our big takeaway here is to continue addressing the land status in our mapping system for housing and recommendation. That's probably where our main focus will lie on, and continued communication with the Lands Department, BIA, our Eastern Land Board Commissions, our various Land Board Commissions, partners, and through the Navajo Hopi Land Commission office as well. I know there's the Naabik'íyáti area and the Little Silversmith home areas that are in similar situations. We did have conversations with Madam Congresswoman Pingree on the ANIR responsibilities. These are ongoing, very heavy discussions regarding not just the need for housing, but our ability to address them and our ability to address the land mapping status and areas. I did visit Rama last week. Very similar. There are some challenges there and some recommendations that we are taking in and continue to work with various communities. Well, I actually work with all 110 chapters, but there are various land status areas that we really need to address. I do call on leadership for your assistance. Was on another call recently with Delegate Herman Daniels, trying to address a request for infrastructure and housing in a tribal park. We just have so many different types of land status that require continued work sessions. Next slide, please. And so I guess in closing here, we're really looking at historic preservation's ability to expand their capacity for field technicians. Again, the land status issues. And we appreciate Ms. Alrina's Yazi's presentation on the one-stop shop. DCD is in support of that. We have been having those preliminary discussions with RDC and the Lands Department. We want to be active and engage in that conversation. That's where I feel that we are connected with the Lands Department and Division of Natural Resources, because as long as our infrastructure list is, we should be funneling all of those clearances and working closely with the Division of Natural Resources. And respectfully speaking, that really is an internal mechanism that we need to strengthen and improve upon. So next slide, please. Again, I mentioned these areas. These are our work session partners that we have reached out to, and will continue to chip away at this conversation and really look at better solutions of meeting the needs of housing to the Navajo people. And so with that, Speaker, we appreciate this opportunity, and we are available for questions if you have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yellowman, to you and your team members that are presented to the Navajo Nation Naabik'íyáti Committee. With that, colleagues, I don't have anybody in the queue at this time. Are there any questions for Dr. Yellowman and her team members?
Speaker, this is Delegate Brown.
Yes. Alma Brown, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Ayate, Speaker, Ado received presentation. 24th Navajo Nation Council. Ado, thank you, Dr. Yoloman, for your presentation. I really enjoyed your PowerPoint presentation also. A wealth of information. I know that previously there's a lot of really good questions to veterans earlier. The first question that I have, really, I want to address the council to understand, and NHA, CHID, Icd-Bg, HUD, especially HUD, to understand that right now in the main market, the capitalism out there on on building a house, all the materials, as far as anything that has to do with building materials. My understanding is that it has triple or quadruple in prices. And what will this look like for these coming funding? I think we need to address this not just only at the nation level, but also at the national level, that these companies are taking advantage of these prices currently. And I know that a lot of our people are also doing their own sweat equity project housing. Some of our people are not waiting for the tribe or HUD or anyone to give them funding, and they're doing this on their own with their paycheck. So that's really good. So again, 24th Navajo Nation Council, how can we address this? And also, this is where I think national leadership need to be involved also, how we are going to help our people. Some of the little funds that they have extra to buy boards, to fix up their homes, and even to build. And the other part to this is leadership, that, working with other organizations, thinking outside the box. I know that we are looking at the ARPA funds. What are some of the next steps on hiring? So Dr. Yellowman, who do you plan on? I'm interested in the strategic plan for the whole nation and how we can help. How can we look for our Navajo people that reside on the nation who have these expertise in building homes? What I support is hiring our own local individuals, giving them a job, as we're aware that during the pandemic, post-pandemic, during the pandemic, a lot of our people in construction have been laid off and they are home. So we do have a lot of experience in carpentry, construction workers that are out there as well. So I want to continue to support them and give them these jobs are going to be coming forth. For myself, I know that when I met with you a few weeks ago, my question to community development and your staff there was, again, some of our chapters are very proactive in writing for grants. So we're waiting for those responses. And I know that we will continue to look for grants. And this is also to the frustration of our own Navajo Nation structural system. It's severely outdated. And I know it's because of previous leadership who have taken advantage of our Navajo people's money, who have stolen money from at the chapter level, at the different department level, as well as including council delegates stealing and misusing funding. And that's the reason why, to my understanding, that these laws, these procurement processes they're not streamlined. They are suffocating, just building houses. I see that, having been in this position and listening to the multiple meetings that we do and looking at the process, 164 process, just basically spending money. I hear this from a lot of our departments, our 501c3 organizations, and so there has to be, in the 24th Navajo Nation Council, how can we remedy these historical misuse of funds? I know that in the past this was allowed, even to where, not allowed, but my Masanas and Chays already knew this. They told me, "Abe ede skeda del abe dia yedat hian kahayos na chehdi ne chekwede dipin ni ye na it kodo sakon ka do lo tanitseno dankes no." So those are some of the responses and the concerns that I've got from our people, when I do go out there and see them and visit them, and even before the pandemic. So right now, I know that this council, we are trying our best and to get away from these historical Navajo Nation leadership wrongdoings, the misuse of funds, and then also allowing them to come back to the nation to either be school board members, etc. But again, these are some of the problems, historical issues and problems that are causing these prolonged process on spending Navajo dollar. And then there's a hiccup and a bottleneck that's happening. So with that, I'm really interested in how we can remedy on spending fundings to build houses for our Navajo families out there. And the other question I have, I know these are CHID fundings that we're talking about, but I know NHA with their HUD funding, the NAHASDA funding, there is this a mandate that's in there, this one phrase where only people that are below the federal poverty income guideline are eligible for these houses, which means that a lot of our young people, or just Navajo people in general who are employed, will not be eligible. With these CHID fundings, is there a clause in there that suggests that they have to be at a certain income level as well? The other question would be to, again, as certified chapters that are thinking outside the box, we're writing grants, and some of these grants require for not just in-kind contribution, but supplemental. Well, how much money have we put into it from the chapter level? And I know that there are matching dollars that is requested. So that would be a question that I'm going to keep asking. I know through your email, you did send information to Roderick Begay with Navajo Nation DOJ. So if we can work on that process, when can we start working on that? So we can, again, this is not asking all the money from the tribes, from the Navajo Nation on these grants. I think this will perpetuate a lot of sweat equity mentality. Sweat equity, when I say that, what I mean is whoever the houses are being built for, that the families, including their relatives, including whatever faith base that might want to help, can put in so many X amount of hours on their behalf for their own housing. And I think this will continue to perpetuate this self-determination that we like to use. And also, I know that this is sustainable, future sustainability, and also depending on ourselves and building. I continue, my chapters are meeting on this, and I want to know if these fundings, when we apply for these grants, that we do have the support from your department. It would be great. I know that the current language and the policy, it doesn't exist yet, but if we can work on some of the next steps, so I'm interested in action items on what we can do next. But again, I'm very happy that my chapters are very creative and innovative in doing this. But we will continue we will need all the technical support that is out there, which means that when we have, while we're working with organizations and creating 501c3s within as Navajo tribal members, that we do have the support from the Navajo Nation. And again, this is to help spend some of these fundings, but ultimately it is to help build these houses for our Navajo families that severely need them. And with these initiatives that we're bringing up, we're already getting a lot of requests from our Navajo families that are out there on the requesting for homes. So that is where we're at. And those are all the questions that I have, but I might have some following questions later. So Speaker, that is it. I thank you.
Thank you. That, colleagues, any other comments, questions at this time? There are none. Let me go back to Dr. Yellowman for response to Honorable Daniel Brown.
Are you doing so?
Speaker, should I proceed?
Yes, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Otto. Yeah, Shanant, Delegate Brown, thank you for your comments and questions. There's quite a bit here. I have about 6 questions here that you may have asked. Number 1 was hiring Navajo contractors and carpenters and kind of increasing our local subcontractors. I do want to share that what we experienced last year during the CARES Act funds, many of our local contractors, maybe sometimes referred to as mom and pop shops, but they did really struggle. And we were thankful for, for those who really hung in there and tried to maintain their business during the pandemic. But as far as the relationship to our procurement, we had quite a few local subcontractors who had difficulty meeting our procurement requirements, such as the bond requirements. And some of the local contractors did not have the bond ability or bond capability to come onto the nation and work on a nation that was heavily impacted by COVID. Our larger Navajo Nation contractors did have the ability to bond and provide liability and an insurance. And so many of our local Navajo contractors, can be difficult for them to meet those requirements. And just for an example, we had another situation most recently, and I believe we were requesting for $1 million in insurance liability to that effect. And it's very difficult for our Navajo Nation contractors and vendors to meet some of those requirements. So we do have some recommendations. We do work closely with the Division of Economic Development, Director Willie, on some of those recommendations and even addressing the NABOA. We have been working on the NABOA, or we have been working through the NABOA on some of our infrastructure-related projects, and we do have some additional recommendations when that time arises as well. So we do have an extra slide. Delegate Brown is correct. Speaker, if we can share a slide here. I did mention what we refer to as an RS means. It's a source that gives us information on increased costs. And I'm going to share that slide right here. So let's go ahead and go to that slide here. We put this slide together when the Citizen 35-18 was going through an extension. When this was going through the extension, we put some of this information together in the event that we would be asked to share these increased costs and what they're looking at or what they're equating to. So if we can go to this particular slide here, we'll share some of the increased costs that we're encountering at DCD. And while that's coming up, I'll go on to the next question here. So NHA, they do, NHA, IHBG, they also have their income limit guidelines under the NAHASDA. Mr. Pat Delguy is on the line. We do have to address Delegate Brown's question on income limits. When I did first get here, the year before last, we were looking into a 184 home loan program for middle income families here on the Navajo Nation. That's still something we may pursue because there is that family income bracket who live outside of the federal poverty guidelines, but who may benefit from the 184 home loan. That's such a hefty list of requirements needed from families, but nonetheless, it is something that may benefit the middle income or dual income families. Oh, next slide here. No, okay, that one's on this. As high as about a 60% increase in square footage. And we truly are experiencing some shortfalls. What was appropriated prior to, so I just wanted to share that. Also, Speaker, I do have Mr. Delguy on the line to talk a little bit more about the income limits. And then lastly, I'll just wrap up. Delegate Brown did ask about assisting the chapters in research funds or funds perhaps through nonprofit organizations or grant writing. We believe that a mechanism would have to be put in place to help cash match those chapters who were seeking additional funds outside of the Navajo Nation government. Oftentimes when you write for a grant or a research grant or some type of a incubator grant, those entities request for a cash match or some type of a matching fund or source to help support that grant. And currently, to my knowledge, that process is not in place for chapters to do so. Some certified LGA chapters have written for grants. Some have been successful in that. But many times some of the chapters do need some type of an assistance or a process in place so that we can support their efforts in seeking additional funds. So Delegate Brown, I'll continue to work with you on that one. Sweat equity is important and necessary. It's something we've had in place for 1,000 years, but oftentimes some of the liability and insurance prevents us from when we see that sometimes with our summer youth employment programs, where we want summer youth to come and help, or even community members to contribute. That was certainly the case last year on our CERT volunteer teams. Anytime we call for volunteers or sweat equity for community members to put in extra work or extra volunteer, we do come across some liability concerns. And those are some new impositions on our government, which we've relied on process for many years. Speaker Damon, if I could call on Mr. Dalgai to answer a little bit more questions, a little bit more in detail on the income limits that Delegate Brown asked. Thank you.
Yes.
Yate, Mr. Speaker, Damon, can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Dalgai, go ahead.
Okay, good. Yate, Otto, delegates, 24th Navajo Nation Council, executive branch, and others listening in on this work session. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, Patrick Dalgai, Topa Hishle, Sanji Kine Bashichin, Tonji Nidashiche, Aro Hanava Nidashinava. I currently am the department manager for Community Housing Infrastructure Department. And thank you for the question, Delegate Brown, regarding income guidelines and income limits under the Housing and Urban Development. I have been working closely with HUD and also with previous projects and so many grants within the past couple of years, and our relationship with HUD has progressed and is still progressing. And so they provide us a lot of information now, over the internet, online website. So a lot of their information has become available to the public, and one of those is the HUD income limits, and which is geared towards infrastructure projects, Icd-Bg projects, and also other programs under HUD, IHBG also. And so a lot of these income limits are to serve low and moderate income families. And so we include that and use that as a guideline, a tool when we apply for grants. And so most of them are measured based on their state and their county in which they reside. The project is going to be located either, you have Apache County, Navajo County, Coconino County, and also counties within New Mexico and Utah state. And so all that information is available, and these type of projects that we go after for infrastructure, whether it's power line or water line, HUD sees it as a one project, not necessarily two individual applicants. So a lot of these income limits are based on the project itself and how many families within that project are going to be served. And but it's not towards any individual. If one individual is above a certain income, that doesn't mean they'll be excluded from a project under Icd-Bg. So, but they'll still be served, but at a lower percentage overall, based on a point system that we utilize. So that's how Icd-Bg has been working, and we've applied a lot of these projects within throughout the Navajo Nation. So I just wanted to clarify that and answer that question, Mr. Brown. And also going back to the material cost increase, I think one also obstacle and challenge that we think we may encounter is which we encounter currently also with the housing improvement program is the timeline for quotations for some of these materials. Some vendors allow only up to 2 weeks, and you know, when we submit the purchase request for purchase order, it goes beyond 2 weeks, and so vendors won't accept any POs that are over the expiration date. So I think that's one other obstacle that we need to I guess tackle here within the nation internally, and work with procurement office to expedite some of these purchase orders immediately, so that we are within some of these timelines that these vendors have for their quotations. And so that's, I just wanted to add to that, that very first question that you mentioned. So I'll quit it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Dr. Yellowman, does that conclude your response?
Thank you, Speaker. It does. We conclude our report here and our responses. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, let me go ahead and go back to the floor. Honorable Eugene So, floor is yours at this time.
Yeah, that's true. Can you hear me, Dr. Yellowman? I want to ask you just one question.
Yes.
So, could been that then we can get some people there for a long time, but they don't have data behind how they're so guys out in interior and some it's a water but they don't have home sites. It would really help, you know, to get some of these houses also repaired, or some of that a lot of things, even the restrooms or it would be very helpful if we could come through with some funds that's coming down the pipeline. So or over hospital. And then we did meet before regards to trying to get some houses for 10 houses per chapter. Basically that's traditionally let's go for this money and see how we can help the people out down on the grounds. Let's go head together and let's fight it through, and let's get this housing down for the people. And whatever else you have there out there with the CDC. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, colleagues? If there's none, we go back to you, Dr. Yellowman, and for a closeout too as well.
Thank you, Speaker Damon, and Shanad Eugene So, Delegate Eugene So. Yeah, I know we've been in ongoing conversations regarding housing, and we appreciate the support and really just the need to move forward on these topics and addressing the needs of the people. So we appreciate that. I think, in closing, from the Division of Community Development, we do feel that we're at the center or at the hub of really connecting partnerships that have not been formed before. And we even are here presenting, co-presenting with one of our partners from NECA here. And we appreciate that partnership. We've been able to expand our capacity and look forward to partnerships with BIA, NHA, veterans, and really facilitating these ongoing collaboration. But really, the truth is our housing needs are dire, and some of the living conditions that our people live in, some of our people are in dire need. So I really encourage and seek the support of leadership and encourage our leaders to continue working together on addressing some of these great challenges that we face. We really can do something about it. We really can. Things can be accomplished. We really can have plans that can be completed, and these challenges can be addressed. It really does take collaboration and partnership and genuine and sincere individuals at the table to help make these changes. And I appreciate that. I appreciate all of the support from the 24th Navajo Nation Council, the Office of the President, Vice President, President Jonathan Nez, Vice President Leiser. These are directives to us, to myself, through the Not Up Plan to really address housing for the Navajo people. And I appreciate all of our staff, our Division of Community Development staff, all of our chapter officials. We have over 300 chapter officials and chapter staff working hard and everyone's eager to really see something change. And we rely on our leaders for that. And I've just enclosed with gratitude, Speaker. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that comments, and then also thank you for your response to the colleagues here at the Naabik'íyáti Committee. With that, colleagues, let's continue down to item number C, Navajo Housing Authority. I think we have Mr. Dwayne Wasetta on the line here with us.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good afternoon. You guys are probably hungry if you're not have had anything to eat yet. Did you receive my email was sent earlier this afternoon?
Yes, we did, and we sent that out, colleagues, at 12:41 p.m.
Okay, we can go over it, or we can put it on screen, but I can go through. It's roughly about 15 slides. So let me start. My name is Dwayne Wasetta, interacting interim CEO of Housing Authority, and been here for several years. A lot of knowledge of the housing development, different compliance requirements. So what I'm going to present to you is the American Rescue Plan of dealing with what we have in terms of the Icd-Bg or the IHBG, Indian Housing Block Grant from HUD. Before we start, though, I'm going to put a little bit of history out here. And when I was looking at this and looking at how all the different rescue plans, recovery plans over the years, over the past 80 years, there's one that stuck out. And it reflects what we're working with now on the Navajo Nation. In 1933, coming out of the Great Depression, there was a Federal Emergency Administration of Public Works enacted by President Franklin Roosevelt. And the Navajo Nation was a big recipient of this. If you look out the doors in council, the council chambers was built during the era of the New Deal, meaning that at the time, they were rebuilding the government, rebuilding the areas of service for hospitals, schools. This is the era when BIA built a lot of schools to try and get education out on the reservations all across. If you look at the president's DOJ, all the sandstones, they were looking at, they created the masonries. And if you go across Navajo Nation, that's evident with some of those skills that were adapted or fine-tuned during this Public Works Administration. And the reason why I'm saying this is that when I go through and look back at the American Rescue Plan, it has the same foundation of 87 years ago. Large-scale public works. Back in 1930, there was $6 billion put in there to provide employment, stabilization, purchasing power, to revive the economy. And that's where we're sitting at here. I know over the years how Navajo's been struggling. I think a couple of weeks ago, you all were talking about how do we fit in the $40 million shortcut or shortfalls. So with the Public Works program, it ran roughly about 9 years from 1935 to 44. And it created a lot of different structures out there. And if we look at the American Rescue Plan on slide 3, that has the same elements in terms of when you look at the monies that are being allocated out there. We have over $300 billion to help state, local, and tribal governments bridge budget shortfalls and migrate fiscal shock. Education funding. I know that BEP has put some money out there to some of our child development. For housing, which we're talking today, the area of healthcare for building new hospitals or clinics. This, when you look back, is under the 2033. It's the same foundation, rebuilding the communities with these areas. So as we go through this, I'm going to focus on how the IHBG stuff is rolled out, but incorporating some areas that we all been talking about in the last 2 to 3 weeks, bridging that unity. One of the big things that's coming out of here is transportation provisions. And I think from what 1933 was the bridges and roadway, those are some of the areas that we focus in on. We have some areas there for agriculture. I know that when NAPI was on, they look at areas, how do we deliver those resources to rural Navajo. There's another thing that we need to really look at and focus on, and we don't, because now, as you know, we're on the internet, is a cybersecurity aspect for our government. And I mentioned earlier the changes of healthcare. How do we bridge some of those areas to housing? How do we bridge it to economic? So moving on to the IHBG block grant, they issued their notice to us on the 13th. Last Thursday, we had a implementation preview, overview training from HUD headquarters. But a little frustrating with me because everything that was presented in your information to the tribal programs is the same requirements of CARES. And the one thing that they, at the end of the presentation, is that our monies that come out here must not duplicate tribal government monies which receive. There's a program requirements that they kept echoing to us. Activities, projects, or programs have three categories: prevent, prepare, and respond. Those are the only three eligibilities. So for us here, we have a couple areas that we can focus on. During the implementation, they tell us that even you got a notice, but from headquarters and the government, there hasn't been official notice of when the money is going to be available, but prepare your documentation. So we're doing that. The schedule I have on slide 4 was kind of a timeline. We received our notice in April. That's the second quarter that we're working in the program year. We're anticipating sometime the second quarter or first quarter, first month of the third quarter to get the money readily available to the nation or to NHA. Then it gives us at least a month to run through the compliance requirements of we have to follow them. So we're looking at least 3 months once we get the official notice from the monies that will be available to the tribe and to NHA. Slide 5. This is one thing that we've been echoing, and I know a lot of us been